The cold came early to Harlan County that November. Walter Brennan noticed it the way a man notices an old wound, not with surprise, but with the dull recognition of something familiar and unwelcome. He felt it in his knuckles first, the way the stiffness settled into the joints before dawn, before the roosters, before the pale gray light crept over the ridge of the Cumberland Mountains and spilled reluctantly across his land. 58 years old, and his body had become a weather instrument, more reliable than the cracked barometer hanging crooked on the barn wall. He was up at 4:47 that morning. He knew the time without looking because he was always up at 4:47. Not by alarm. Walter Brennan hadn't owned an alarm clock since 1987, but by the particular quality of the darkness. The way the silence shifted from the deep black silence of midnight to the thinner, more tentative silence of almost morning. His body had learned the farm's rhythms over 3 decades, and now those rhythms lived inside him like a second heartbeat. The farmhouse was a 2-story white-clapboard structure that had been in the Brennan family since 1923, when his grandfather, Patrick Brennan, had cleared the land with a mule and a stubbornness that bordered on pathological. The paint was peeling in long strips along the south-facing wall. The porch steps sagged at the left end. The screen door had a tear in it that Walter had been meaning to fix since July. None of these things bothered him particularly. The house was solid where it counted, in the bones, in the foundation, in the thick stone chimney that drew perfectly even on the coldest nights. He put on his work clothes in the dark, thermal undershirt, flannel shirt, the green and black one, faded to something between sage and charcoal, canvas work pants, wool socks, the heavy boots he'd resoled twice. He didn't turn on the bedroom light. He hadn't turned on the bedroom light in the morning since Carol died, 3 years ago this past September. It was not a conscious decision. It was simply that the light felt wrong in the mornings now, too harsh, too declarative, announcing a day that would be lived alone. He made coffee the way his father had taught him, measured with a tin spoon, not a measuring cup, because a man who measures his coffee with a cup doesn't trust his own hands. He drank it standing at the kitchen window, watching the darkness over the east pasture begin its slow retreat. The farm stretched out before him in the gray pre-dawn 43 acres of mixed land. Some of it still productive, some of it gone to scrub since he'd stopped running cattle 2 years ago. The south field still bore soybeans. The 2 acres behind the barn were in winter wheat. The rest was his, just land, just the particular silence of a place that asks nothing and gives nothing and simply endures. Walter Brennan had 3 children. He thought about this the way a man thinks about a recurring dream, aware of it, unable to fully engage with it, unable to fully let it go. His eldest, Robert Brennan, was 41 years old and lived in Nashville. They had not spoken in 14 months. The falling out had been over the land, specifically over what Robert called a reasonable business decision and what Walter called a betrayal so fundamental it had physically nauseated him when he heard it proposed at the kitchen table where they were sitting right now. Robert had wanted to sell the East 40 to a developer from Memphis who was putting in a distribution center. 40 acres of Brennan land that Patrick Brennan had cleared with his hands, and Walter's father had improved, and Walter himself had worked for 31 years. Gone to a distribution center, Walter had asked Robert to leave his house. Robert had left. Neither man had found a way back across that distance. His daughter, Christine Brennan Holloway, lived in Knoxville with her husband and 2 daughters. She called every Sunday at 6 o'clock, and Walter answered, and they talked for 20 minutes about the weather and the girls' school activities, and carefully, tenderly avoided every subject that mattered. It was a ritual of maintenance, keeping the connection minimally alive, like checking on a pilot light. His youngest, Marcus Brennan, was 33 and working on a fishing boat out of Kodiak, Alaska. He sent postcards occasionally. He was the one most like Walter, solitary, stubborn, comfortable with silence and distance. They understood each other well enough not to need much contact. Walter finished his coffee, rinsed the cup, left it on the drain board. He spent the morning the way he spent most mornings that time of year, checking fence lines along the north pasture, which bordered State Route 119 for about a quarter mile. The fence was old cedar post and wire, and the wire had a tendency to work loose in the corners where the ground heaved with the freeze-thaw cycles. He found 3 sections that needed attention, hammered the staples back in, tightened the wire with the fence stretcher, worked steadily and without particular thought. This was what Walter valued most about physical work, the way it emptied the mind without requiring you to consciously empty it. You didn't have to decide to stop thinking about Robert. You simply drove a staple, and thinking about Robert became irrelevant, crowded out by the resistance of the wood, and the bite of the cold, and the need to position the hammer correctly. The body solved the problem the mind couldn't. By 11:30, he had worked his way to the southeast corner of the property, where the fence line met the ditch along Route 119. He sat on the tailgate of his 2009 Ford F250. The truck was burgundy once, now a kind of sun-faded brick color, with a cracked passenger side mirror and 187,000 miles on it, and opened the lunch Carol used to pack for him. Except Carol hadn't packed it. Carol was gone. He packed it himself now, the same thing she used to pack, because he had never learned to want anything different. 2 roast beef sandwiches on white bread with yellow mustard, a thermos of coffee, an apple, 3 oatmeal cookies, and a fold of wax paper. He ate the first sandwich looking out at the road. Route 119 didn't carry much traffic on a Tuesday in November. A feed truck went by, a county road maintenance vehicle, a woman in a silver SUV going too fast. Walter watched them pass with the detached interest of a man accustomed to watching the world move past him. He was halfway through the second sandwich when he saw the man. He was sitting on a section of guardrail about 40 yards up the road, just past the point where the shoulder widened before the bridge over Piney Creek. He was sitting with his elbows on his knees and his head slightly bent, and even from 40 yards Walter could see that he was not dressed for the weather. A canvas jacket, the kind of thing you might wear in October, not November. Dark pants that were not work pants. Shoes that were completely wrong for a rural road in any season. He was not moving. Walter watched him for a moment. Then he got down from the tailgate, wrapped the remaining half of his sandwich back in its wax paper, and walked up the road. The man heard him coming when Walter was about 15 feet away, and looked up. He was somewhere between 50 and 60, Walter estimated, though it was hard to say with precision because he had the look of a man who had been sleeping rough, skin-dried and chapped, dark smudges under his eyes. Several days of gray and brown beard that was not the beard of a man who had chosen to grow a beard. His eyes were dark brown and held an expression Walter had seen before, on livestock sometimes, when they'd gotten through a fence and wandered too far from the familiar, a kind of exhausted bewilderment. The look of a creature that had run until it didn't know how to stop, and now had stopped, and didn't know what to do with the stillness. "You all right?" Walter said. It was not a question with much range of expected answer. It was the rural Tennessee way of opening a conversation with a stranger, the verbal equivalent of standing at a respectful distance with your hands visible. The man looked at him for a moment before answering. "I'm not sure," he said. His voice was educated, Walter noted, not Southern, Mid-Atlantic maybe, or the kind of accent that had been trained out of any regional character. "I think I've been walking longer than I realized." "Where are you headed?" A pause. "I don't know exactly." Walter looked at him. He looked at the shoes again, leather-soled, entirely wrong. He looked at the canvas jacket. He looked at the hands, which were chapped and had a healing blister on the right palm, the kind you got from unaccustomed physical exertion. "You hungry?" Walter said. The man seemed surprised by the directness of the question. Yes, actually." Walter walked back to the truck. He came back with the half sandwich, the apple, and the 3 oatmeal cookies in their wax paper. He held them out. The man looked at them for a moment in a way that Walter couldn't quite read. It wasn't just hunger, though the hunger was there. It was something else. something Walter didn't have a name for yet. The man took the food. He ate the half sandwich in 4 bites, not wolfing it, but close. He ate with the focused attention of someone who has been hungry enough that eating requires concentration. "Walter Brennan," Walter said, sitting down on the guardrail a few feet away, pouring himself the last of his coffee from the thermos. The man chewed, swallowed. "Daniel," he said. Then, after a brief pause that might have been hesitation or simply fatigued, "Daniel Marsh. You from around here, Daniel?" "No." He bit into the apple. "Virginia, originally. I've been traveling. On foot, mostly." He seemed to recognize how this sounded. "I had a car. I left it, outside of Bristol, I think. About 2 weeks ago." Walter said nothing. He drank his coffee. On the other side of Route 119, a red-tailed hawk landed on a fence post and sat there with the supreme indifference of a creature that had never once in its life worried about anything as abstract as money or failure or the distance between fathers and sons. "You need to get somewhere specific?" Walter asked. "I can drive you into Harlan if you need a phone." Daniel Marsh was eating the oatmeal cookies now, slowly, as if he wanted them to last. He looked out at the same view Walter was looking at, the winter bare tree line, the creek bottom, the hawk on the fence post. "Not really," he said quietly. "There's nowhere I need to be." Walter nodded. He understood this more than he would have been able to explain to anyone. There were days, more of them lately, when he felt exactly the same way. Not suicidal, nothing dramatic. Simply unclaimed. Simply a man with nowhere that specifically required him. "Well," Walter said, standing up, picking up the empty thermos. "It's getting cold. You're welcome to come sit in the truck while you figure it out." Daniel Marsh looked up at him. There was something in his expression, a crack in it, a thinning of whatever composure he was maintaining, that Walter noticed and deliberately did not comment on. "Thank you," Daniel said. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Walter's fine." They walked back to the truck. Walter started the engine and turned the heat on. They sat there for a while without talking, watching the hawk on the fence post, listening to the tick of the engine warming up. After a while, Walter said, "I've got a spare room if you need a place for a night or two. Nothing special, but it's warm." Daniel Marsh turned to look at him. "You don't know anything about me." "No," Walter agreed. "But you ate my sandwich, so I figure you're committed to at least not being actively dangerous." It surprised a sound out of Daniel, not quite a laugh, but the ghost of one, the memory of a laugh. It changed his face briefly, into something younger. "I appreciate it," Daniel said. "I'll try not to be any trouble." "Trouble," Walter said, putting the truck in drive, "is relative." He pulled back onto Route 119 and headed toward the farmhouse, and neither man spoke again until they reached the gravel drive. And the silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the particular silence of two solitary people who have each, in their own way, been carrying more than they can hold, and have momentarily, cautiously, set it down. The spare room was the one that had been Marcus's, the smallest of the 3 upstairs bedrooms, with a single window that faced west, and a quilt on the bed that Carol had made in the last year of her life from squares of old flannel shirts. Walter brought up 2 towels and set them on the dresser without ceremony. "Bathrooms across the hall," he said. "Hot water takes about a minute to come through. Dinner's at 6 if you want it. If you don't, no obligation." Daniel stood in the middle of the small room with the particular stillness of a man who has not stood in a real room for some time. He looked at the quilt. He looked at the window. He looked at the dresser with its plain mirror. And Walter watched him look at his own reflection, and then quickly look away, as if the face there was not one he wanted to spend time with. "Thank you, Walter," he said. The words were inadequate, and he seemed to know it. Walter nodded and went back downstairs. He made beef stew for dinner, the kind that takes 3 hours, with the meat cut into real pieces and the potatoes holding their shape and the gravy dark and thick, because it was cold and because he had the time, and because, though he wouldn't have admitted it to anyone, It felt less wrong to cook a real meal when there was someone else in the house. Daniel came down at 5:50, showered and in the same clothes but cleaner, his face shaved with the spare razor Walter had left on the bathroom sink. He looked better and worse simultaneously, better physically, but with the beard gone, the exhaustion in his face was more visible. The lines around his eyes deeper, the shadows more pronounced. He sat at the kitchen table without being invited to, which Walter interpreted as a good sign. A man comfortable enough to sit without ceremony was a man who had some basic social instincts intact. They ate. Walter had made biscuits, which came out well. Daniel ate 2 bowls of stew and 3 biscuits and drank 2 cups of coffee and said at the end of it that it was the best meal he'd had in recent memory. And his voice when he said it had something in it that was raw, in a way that made Walter think he meant something more than the food. "Get some sleep," Walter said, clearing the bowls. "You look like you need it." Daniel nodded. He pushed back from the table. Then he stopped. "I want you to know," he said, "that I'm not in any trouble with the law. I haven't done anything criminal. He stopped again. Whatever he was trying to say seemed to require a vocabulary he was having trouble accessing. "I just needed to stop," he finally said. "Everything. I needed to stop everything." Walter set the bowls in the sink. "I figured something like that," he said. "It's fine, get some sleep." Daniel Marsh went upstairs. Walter washed the dishes and dried them and put them away and stood at the kitchen window for a while looking out at the dark farm, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, but something in its neighborhood. The house felt less like an empty container. He turned off the lights at 9 o'clock and went to bed. Down the hall in Marcus's old room under Carol's quilt, Daniel Marsh lay on his back with his eyes open and stared at the ceiling of a stranger's house in rural Tennessee and listened to the silence of the farm. Real silence. Absolute silence. The kind he had not heard in 20 years, and felt something in his chest begin, very slowly, to loosen. Neither man yet understood what the next few days would cost them, or give them, or permanently change. That reckoning was still ahead. For now, there was only the cold night, the warm house, the smell of beef stew still hanging in the kitchen air, and 2 men on opposite ends of the same human exhaustion, sleeping in the same building for reasons neither could have entirely explained. Walter Brennan was a man of routines, and he did not alter them for company. At 4:47 the next morning, he was dressed and downstairs, and the coffee was made by 5, and he was outside checking on the winter wheat by 5:30. If Daniel Marsh was going to be in his house, Daniel Marsh was going to experience the house as it actually was, not a performance of hospitality. Walter had no interest in performing anything for anyone. He was surprised at 7:15 to find Daniel standing on the porch when he came back in from the barn. The man was holding a mug of coffee. He'd found the coffee, found a mug, figured out the stove, and was looking out at the farm with an expression that Walter couldn't immediately classify. Not tourist appreciation. Not the vague politeness a visitor shows for a host's home. Something more concentrated than that. "Didn't expect you up," Walter said, pulling off his boots on the porch steps. "I heard you leave," Daniel said. "Couldn't go back to sleep." He paused. "I hope you don't mind about the coffee. Made it to be drunk." Daniel nodded at the south field. "Soybeans?" Walter looked at him. "Yeah, late harvest. Got most of it in before the freeze. Why, the row spacing. It's tighter than standard. That's intentional?" Walter studied the man for a moment. "Narrower rows, more canopy, holds moisture better in a dry August. You know farming?" "I know about farming," Daniel said, with a distinction in his voice that Walter filed away. "There's a difference." Walter went inside, poured himself coffee, came back out. They stood on the porch together in the cold morning, looking at the land. The sky was that particular pale pewter of a Tennessee November morning, flat and high, with a thin line of orange along the eastern ridge that would be gone in 20 minutes. "How many acres total?" Daniel asked. 43. Used to run 60 head of Black Angus on the bottom 20. Stopped 2 years ago. Why? It was a direct question. Walter appreciated directness. Couldn't keep up with it alone. And the margins on cow-calf operations in this county aren't what they were. He drank his coffee. I'm not complaining. The soybeans cover the operating costs. The wheat covers the property tax. It's enough. Just enough isn't usually enough for most people, Daniel said. He didn't say it critically. He said it like a man who had spent a long time in the world of more than enough and was trying to remember what the arithmetic felt like. Most people want different things than I want, Walter said. They were quiet for a while. A pair of crows crossed the south field low and fast, going east. The orange line on the ridge faded. What do you want? Daniel asked. Walter looked at him. It was an unusual question, not the kind men asked each other in rural Tennessee, not before they'd known each other for years at minimum. But Daniel Marsh asked it without aggression or intrusion, with a genuine curiosity that seemed to come from somewhere personal. I want the land to keep being the land, Walter said. I want to work it right. I want to die having done right by what my grandfather cleared and my father maintained. He paused. That's most of it. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. That's more than most people have, he said finally, a clear sense of what they're for. Walter studied him. What are you for, Daniel? The question landed. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, and he looked out at the south field with the specific expression of a man confronting a thing he has been walking away from for weeks. I used to know, he said. I'm not sure I do anymore. Over the next 2 days, Daniel Marsh settled into the farm's rhythms with a naturalness that Walter found simultaneously surprising and not. He was not a physical man. His hands showed it, his movements showed it. But he was observant, and he learned quickly, and he had the quality, rare in Walter's experience, of doing exactly what was needed without having to be told twice, and without adding unnecessary commentary to the doing of it. He held fence posts while Walter drove them. He learned to check the tension on the wire by feel after Walter showed him once. He filled the water troughs in the small paddock where Walter kept 2 elderly horses, Chester and May, both past working age, kept from pure stubbornness on Walter's part, with a focused attention that suggested he took even small tasks seriously. In the evenings they ate together at the kitchen table. Walter cooked because cooking was part of the farm's routine and because Daniel Marsh, it became clear, had been surviving for the past 2 weeks on gas station food and whatever churches and diners in small towns would give a man who looked like he'd been sleeping in his car. He ate Walter's food with the gratitude of a man whose body had been asking for something real. They talked gradually, in the way of men who are not accustomed to talking, in increments, in the spaces between practical exchanges, building a conversation the way you build a fence line, one post at a time. Walter learned that Daniel was from McLean, Virginia originally, though he'd lived the last 20 years in Charlotte, North Carolina. He had been married. He said had been in the clipped way of someone who has rehearsed the compression of a painful thing. No children. He did not elaborate and Walter did not press. Daniel learned that Carol Brennan had died of pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in July and gone by September. The 2 months between diagnosis and death, a compressed season of its own, that Walter described, with the flat precision of a man who had processed the grief into something manageable and kept it there by not giving it too much air. 2 months, Daniel said quietly, the third evening, over roast chicken. 47 days, Walter said. Between diagnoses and the end, silence. Was she in pain? Daniel asked. Not at the end, Walter said. They managed that part all right. Daniel nodded. He looked at his plate. I'm sorry, Walter, thank you. Walter refilled their coffee cups. She would have liked you, I think. She liked people who asked real questions. Daniel looked up. Something crossed his face, gratitude, but under it something more complicated, something that Walter watched and waited on, and didn't push. I haven't been a person who asks real questions for a long time, Daniel said. I've been a person who asks strategic questions. There's a difference. There is, Walter agreed. On the fourth evening, something shifted. They had been out all day, Walter doing the last of the fall field work, Daniel learning to operate the small tractor with the bush hog attachment on the back section where the scrub had come in. And they were tired in the good way, the way that comes from physical work done in cold air. And they sat at the kitchen table after dinner with the bourbon Walter kept for occasions, and the particular ease of men who have worked alongside each other. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. You generally do, Walter said. Your son, Robert. Walter's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. A subtle closing, like a door being eased toward its frame without quite latching. What about him? You mentioned him the first day, just once. The way a man mentions something that's hurting him and then decides not to mention it again. Walter drank his bourbon. He looked at the table. He looked at the window. He looked at his hands. He wanted to sell part of the farm to a developer, Walter said finally. I told him to get out of my house, and he did, and neither of you has moved since. Walter said nothing. How long? Daniel asked. 14 months. What would it take? Walter looked at him. For what? For one of you to move? The question sat on the table between them. Walter turned his bourbon glass slowly. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the wind had picked up, coming off the ridge with that particular November insistence, and the old house settled around it the way old houses do, not resisting, just absorbing. I don't know, Walter said. It was an honest answer. He had not found a mechanism. He knew the silence had gone past the point where it solved anything. Knew it the way a fence post is rotted before you test it by looking, by the quality of it, but knowing and having a way through were different things. Pride is expensive, Daniel said quietly. I know, I've paid for mine. So I'm still paying. Walter looked at him. What did yours cost you? A long pause. Daniel turned his own glass. The wind pushed at the windows. Everything that mattered, he said. And then, before Walter could respond, he stood up and said goodnight and went upstairs. And Walter sat alone at the kitchen table, with the bourbon, and the wind, and the particular weight of things said and unsaid. And for the first time, in 14 months, he thought about calling Robert, not with any plan to do so, not yet, but with something approaching the possibility of it, the distant light of it, visible for the first time across the dark distance between them. On the fifth morning, Walter came downstairs to find Daniel Marsh at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a yellow legal pad. He was writing something, and he covered it, not furtively, but instinctively, the way a person covers private writing, when Walter came in. Morning, Walter said. Morning. Daniel looked up. He looked like he'd been up for a while. Walter, I need to tell you something. Walter poured his coffee and sat down across from him. He waited. My name is Daniel Marsh, Daniel said. That part is true, but I haven't been entirely honest about the rest of it. Walter drank his coffee. He said nothing. I'm not just a man who needed to stop, Daniel said. I mean, I am that, but there's more. He paused, and in the pause, Walter could see him deciding something, choosing the next words with a care that suggested they had weight. I run a company, an agricultural investment company, Marsh Capital Agricultural Partners. We operate in 17 states, 43,000 acres under management. He paused again. I'm probably the reason 2 farms in this county sold out in the last 3 years. The kitchen was very quiet. Walter set his coffee cup down. I know one of those farms, he said. His voice was level. The Morrison place of Bill Morrison. His family had that land since 1931. I know, Daniel said. Bill Morrison died 8 months after the sale. His wife says it was the heart, but people here know better. I know that too, Daniel said. And his voice, when he said it, had something in it that was not defense and not excuse. It was something closer to the sound a man makes when he has been carrying a specific weight for a specific time and has finally put it down, not because the weight is lighter, but because he can no longer carry it and remain upright. Walter looked at him for a long time. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. "Because you fed me," Daniel said, "and because I have been lying by omission in your house for 5 days and your house doesn't deserve that." He paused. "And because I think you're the first genuinely honest person I've been in a room with in about 15 years. Walter stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the farm, his 43 acres, his soybeans, his winter wheat, his fence lines he'd built and maintained with his own hands, his grandfather's land. "Did you come here looking for farms to buy?" he asked. His voice was still level, but Daniel would have had to be much less perceptive than he was not to hear what was under it. "No," Daniel said immediately. "What I told you is true. I left my car in Bristol 2 weeks ago, and I walked because I needed to walk, and I sat on that guardrail because I couldn't walk anymore. This was not a plan. None of this was a plan." Walter stood at the window for a long time. "I need to think," he said finally. "Of course," Daniel said. Walter got his jacket and his boots and went outside. Daniel Marsh sat at the kitchen table with his yellow legal pad and his cooling coffee and waited, in the particular silence of a man who has said the true thing and must now live in the time before he knows what it costs him. Walter walked the fence line. It was what he did when he needed to think, not pace, not drive, not sit. Walk the fence line because the fence line had a practical purpose, because moving through the land with a purpose settled something in him that pure, aimless movement couldn't. He walked the north fence first, then turned east along the tree line, then south toward the creek bottom, moving at his work pace, steady and unhurried, seeing without particularly looking, processing without forcing the process. Daniel Marsh, Marsh Capital Agricultural Partners. 43,000 acres. 17 states. Walter knew the name. He knew it the way a man in farming knows the names of the large forces that shaped his world, not personally, not in detail, but by their effects. He'd heard it at the co-op, at the county extension meetings, in the kind of conversations that happened between men leaning on truck beds in parking lots after business was done. Men talking about what was happening to the land, why the old family farms kept selling, who was behind the consolidation that was slowly changing the face of agriculture in the rural South. Marsh Capital was not the worst of them. Walter knew this, had to admit it. There were operators who came in and stripped the land, who ran industrial commodity operations on thin margins and poisoned the soil with chemical shortcuts, who cared nothing for the particular character of a place. Marsh Capital was not that, from what Walter understood. They were aggressive buyers, but they maintained the land well. They employed local people. They did not, in the immediate sense, destroy what they acquired. But the Morrison place. Bill Morrison, 74 years old, whose grandfather had broken that ground in a different century, who had raised 3 children on that land and expected to die on it, who had been squeezed by debt, by low commodity prices, by the particular mathematical trap that small family farms fell into when the numbers turned against them until there was no choice left, and had sold, and had died 8 months later in a hospital bed in Harlan of a heart attack that everyone who knew him understood had been coming since the day he signed the papers. Walter had been to the funeral. He had stood at the graveside in the cold and listened to Bill Morrison's son read a passage from Ecclesiastes, and had thought about his own land and his own age, and had felt a fear he didn't often let himself feel, the fear of the same arithmetic, eventually closing in on him. He stood at the south fence line, looking across Route 119 toward the Morrison land now, a neighbor's land once, farmed by a neighbor, recognizable in the particular way of places that have been tended by the same family for generations, and now different, not ruined, just different, no longer belonging to anyone who would grieve it. He thought about Daniel Marsh sitting on that guardrail, famished and exhausted, with healing blisters on his palm, and the look of a man whose internal machinery had finally, catastrophically failed. He thought about the way Daniel had eaten the half sandwich, and the way he'd said thank you in Marcus's room, and the way he'd worked without complaint for 5 days, and asked real questions, and told the truth when he didn't have to. He thought, a man can be more than one thing. He thought, so can his choices. He turned around and walked back to the farmhouse. Daniel was still at the kitchen table. He'd washed the cups and refilled them, and was sitting with his hands around his mug, looking at nothing in particular, with the patience of a man who had decided to wait and had made peace with the waiting. Walter sat down. "Tell me about the Morrison place," he said. "Tell me how it happened." Daniel looked at him, steadily, without flinching. "Our acquisition team identified the property as part of a county-wide analysis in 2021. Morrison had a note coming due with a regional bank, refinancing from 2018 that he couldn't service when soybean prices dropped. We approached him through a broker." He paused. He didn't have other options by then. "We paid fair market value. Sometimes fair market value is still a cruel number. Did you know about him? Bill Morrison specifically? Did you know what the place meant to him?" "Not when the deal was initiated. I learned afterward." Another pause. "I reviewed the file when I heard he'd died. It was thorough and it was legal and it was correct by every metric my company uses, and when I read it, I felt sick." "What did you do with that feeling?" "I put it in a file," Daniel said, "and I kept working." He looked down at his hands. "I was good at that, putting things in files, my marriage, the farms, the things I knew were wrong." He was quiet for a moment. "The file got too heavy. That's essentially what happened to me, the weight of everything I'd filed away." Walter looked at him for a long time. "My son Robert," he said, "wanted to sell the East 40 because he saw which way the numbers were going for me. He saw that I was getting older and the operating costs were going up, and he calculated that I'd be in the same position as Bill Morrison in about 8 to 10 years. He paused. He wasn't wrong about the arithmetic. He just didn't understand that the arithmetic isn't the only thing that matters. Daniel was listening with the absolute attention of a man who understands that what he's hearing is important. "I called him a traitor," Walter said. "I said things I can't unsay, and then I stopped talking to him." He picked up his coffee. "I've been putting it in a file." The acknowledgement passed between them in the kitchen's quiet like a current. Neither man dramatic about it, neither looking away from it. "What are you going to do?" Daniel asked. "About you or about Robert?" "Either." "Both." Walter set down his cup. "About you, I need to know something. Is there any part of you being here that has anything to do with my land? Any part, not even intentional, just the habit of the way you look at the world?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He gave the question the respect of sitting with it. "When I walked your fence line with you," he said, "I noticed things. I can't turn that off the way I land, the potential, the location relative to infrastructure I noticed." He met Walter's eyes directly. "But I have never thought about acquiring this property. I'm not going to. That is not what this is." "Why should I believe that?" "Because I told you what I am before you found out any other way," Daniel said. "And because I am sitting in a farmhouse in Harlan County, Tennessee, with no phone and no car, and 2 changes of clothes and a legal pad, and that is not how I conduct acquisitions." To pause. "And because you are the first person in a very long time who has treated me like a human being without knowing what I was worth, and I am not going to betray that." Walter nodded slowly. "All right," he said. They sat quietly for a moment. "I'm going to call my son," Walter said then. "Not today. But soon. I've been telling myself I'm waiting for the right time, but there isn't a right time for this kind of thing. There's only deciding to do it." Daniel nodded. "No," he said quietly, "there isn't a right time." "What about you?" Walter said. "What are you going to do?" Daniel looked at the legal pad on the table. Walter could see now that it was covered in writing, dense, close-written pages, the kind of writing a man does when he's been waiting for the right surface to put something down on. "I've been writing," Daniel said. "For the first time in probably 20 years without a business purpose, I've been writing. Just what I think, what I've done, what I'd change." He paused. "I don't know what comes next, but I know I can't go back to what was before. The version of me that existed in Charlotte 2 weeks ago is gone. I'm not sure if that's a tragedy or a relief. Maybe it's both," Walter said. "Maybe," Daniel agreed. That afternoon, Walter drove into Harlan and made 3 calls from his cell phone in the parking lot of the hardware store, which was where he always made calls he needed privacy for, in the particular way of men who live alone and have no one to need privacy from except themselves. The first call was to Christine, his daughter in Knoxville, who picked up on the second ring and was surprised to hear from him on a Wednesday. "I'm all right," Walter told her immediately because he knew the first thing she'd think. "I just wanted to call." The second call was to Marcus in Kodiak, which went to voicemail. Walter left a message that was 3 sentences long and said he'd been thinking about him and to call when he had time and that he hoped the fishing was good. The third call he didn't make. He sat with his phone and Robert's number on the screen for a long time. Then he put the phone in his pocket and went into the hardware store and bought a bag of fence staples and a new hammer handle to replace the cracked one on his framing hammer. The third call wasn't ready yet, but the distance to it was shorter than it had been that morning. That was something. In Walter Brennan's arithmetic, that was something real. That evening, Daniel asked if he could help with dinner, and Walter put him to work peeling potatoes, which he did with the slightly awkward focus of a man who has not peeled a potato in some time, but approaches it as a task worth doing correctly. "Where did you grow up?" Walter asked, cutting onions. "McLean, Virginia. My father was in government, State Department. We moved a lot when I was young. Germany, Japan, 2 years in Brazil." He peeled steadily. "I was always the new kid. I learned early that the best way to belong somewhere was to be useful, competent, to offer people something. Is that what went wrong?" Daniel considered this. "I think what went wrong is that I confused being useful with being valuable, and then I confused being valuable with being irreplaceable. And then the company became the proof of value, and the accumulation became the proof of the company, and somewhere in there the actual human being got filed away with everything else." "What happened to your marriage?" "She left 3 years ago." He set a peeled potato in the bowl and started another. "Her name is Patricia. She told me she'd been living alone in our marriage for years. I told her that wasn't fair. She said fairness wasn't the point." He paused. "She was right about all of it. Do you still talk to her?" "No. She remarried last year. I found out through someone we both knew." He said it without self-pity, with the flat factual tone of a man who has accepted a thing. "I wasn't good to her. I wasn't bad to her either, not in the dramatic sense. I just wasn't present. I was always elsewhere, always optimizing the next thing. She deserved a man who could be in the room with her." Walter added the onions to the pan. They sizzled. "Carol used to say," Walter said, "that the farm was my first wife and she was my second." "Did she say it bitterly?" "No. She said it the way you say a true thing you've made peace with. She understood me. She understood that the land was part of me in a way that wasn't transferable. She just wanted to be included in it, and I think I did that all right. I think she knew she mattered most." He paused. "I hope she did." "She knew," Daniel said. It was a presumptuous thing to say, knowing nothing of Carol Brennan beyond a few stories and a quilt. But he said it with the conviction that came from somewhere, and Walter didn't argue with. They ate pot roast and potatoes and didn't talk much more. But the quiet was different from the quiet of the first evenings, warmer, more inhabited. The quiet of 2 men who know each other well enough that silence is a form of conversation. 3 days later, Daniel Marsh got a phone call. Walter was in the barn when it happened. He hadn't been directly aware of it, only noticed later when Daniel came to find him with his face changed. The composure he'd been carefully rebuilding over the past week rearranged into something tighter and less certain. My assistant, Daniel said. She'd been trying to reach me for 2 weeks. My board has been trying to reach me. There are decisions that need to be made. Legal things. He paused. There's a situation at the company. I won't bore you with the details, but I have to go back. Walter set down the harness he'd been repairing. When? Soon. I need to arrange a car. He paused. I wanted to tell you before I made any arrangements, out of respect. Walter looked at him. I know what I said, Daniel said, about your land. I meant it. I mean it now. That hasn't changed. I believe you, Walter said. And he did. What surprised him was how clearly he did. I don't know what goes back with me, Daniel said. The person who left Charlotte 2 weeks ago. I don't want to reassemble him exactly, but I don't know yet what I'm assembling instead. He looked around the barn, at Chester and May in their stalls, at the organized walls of tools, at the quality of the light coming through the high windows. This place has done something to me, I don't know quite what, but something. It does that, Walter said. Daniel left on a Saturday. A car came for him, a black SUV, driven by a young man in a jacket and tie, who looked comprehensively out of place on Walter's gravel drive, who stood by the vehicle with the patient professionalism of someone paid to wait without comment. Daniel Marsh stood on Walter's porch with a bag that Walter had loaned him, an old canvas duffel that had been Walter's father's, containing his 2 changes of clothes, his legal pad, which was now nearly full, and a container of oatmeal cookies that Walter had made that morning, without announcing that he was making them. They shook hands. Walter's grip was the grip of a man who has worked with his hands all his life. Daniel's was different now from how it had been 10 days ago, still not a farmer's hand, but no longer entirely a boardroom hand either, somewhere in between, a hand that had done real work recently and wasn't quite sure yet what it was. Call your son, Daniel said. I will. Not soon. Now. Today. Walter looked at him. You don't soften things, do you? I wasted a lot of time softening things, Daniel said. I've decided to stop. Walter nodded. Travel safe. Thank you, Walter. He looked at the farm one more time, Southfield barn, the 2 old horses in the paddock, the winter wheat behind the barn going pale gold in the November morning light. I mean that in more ways than I can say right now. I know, Walter said. The black SUV went down the gravel drive and turned onto Route 119 and was gone. Walter stood on the porch for a while. The farm was the same as it had always been. The silence was the same silence. But he stood in it differently, aware of it in a new way, aware of how much space it held, aware that space and emptiness were not the same thing. He went inside. He poured a cup of coffee. He sat at the kitchen table. He picked up his phone and found Robert's number and looked at it for a moment. He pressed call. It rang 3 times. 4. Walter was composing himself for voicemail when the call connected. Dad? Robert's voice. His son's voice. Surprised, guarded, with something under the guardedness that Walter recognized as the same thing he was feeling, the careful, almost painful alertness of someone who doesn't know yet if this is going to hurt. Robert, Walter said. It's me. I know. I can see that. A pause. Is everything all right? Everything is fine. The farm is fine. I'm fine. Walter looked out the kitchen window at the south field. I'm calling because I want to talk to you. Silence on the line. A long silence. Walter waited through it. Okay, Robert said finally. His voice was different now, quieter, the guardedness shifting into something less armored. Okay, Dad, I'm listening. Walter breathed. I shouldn't have told you to leave, he said. I disagreed with what you suggested, and I still do. But you were worried about me, and you were trying to help in the way you know how to help, and I threw it back at you like it was a betrayal. He paused. That wasn't fair to you. Another silence. Dad, let me finish. Walter's voice was steady, the way it got when he was saying something that cost him. I'm not going to sell the land. That's not changing. But you're my son, and I'd rather have a son who disagrees with me than no son at all. And I've had no son for 14 months, and it's... He stopped. The word he didn't say was enough. It's been enough. It's cost enough. I've been punishing myself and calling it principle. Dad, Robert said, and now his voice had cracked open. Just slightly, just along one line, the way a drought-hardened field cracks when the first real rain comes. I handled it wrong too. I brought it up wrong. I didn't ask you. I presented it like a plan that was already decided, and you were trying to protect me, Walter said. I know. The farm means... I know what it means, Dad. I do know. I just got scared and I did it wrong. I know, Walter said again. They were quiet together on the phone, across the 180 miles between Harlan County and Nashville, and the silence this time was different from any other silence in the past 14 months. It was the silence of two people who have stopped pushing against each other and are standing, exhausted and relieved, in the space they've made between them. Can I come up? Robert said. Not to talk about anything specific, just to see you. Walter felt something ease in his chest, a knot that had been there so long he'd stopped noticing it as pain and had started accepting it as the shape of things. Next weekend, he said. I'll make a pot roast. Yeah, Robert said. He laughed a little, not much, just a breath of it, but real. Yeah, that sounds good, Dad. They talked for an hour. About Robert's work in Nashville. He was in commercial real estate, had his own small firm, was doing well enough. About Christine's girls and their school plays. About Marcus and the fishing boat. About the farm. Walter described the winter wheat, the fence work, the 2 horses. He did not mention Daniel Marsh. That story was not yet ready to be told to anyone. It was still too close to him, still being understood. When they hung up, Walter sat for a while at the kitchen table. Then he went outside and worked. Daniel Marsh's return to Charlotte was, by any external measure, a crisis managed. He arrived to find his company in the particular kind of controlled alarm that organizations fall into when their central figure disappears without warning, not collapsing because the systems were sound and the people were competent, but running on redundancy and assumption, making decisions without the authority to fully make them, waiting. He walked into the 42nd floor of the Marsh Capitol building on a Monday morning, and his assistant, Rebecca Oates, who had been with him for 11 years and was one of the most unflappable people he knew, looked at him with an expression that contained relief and concern in equal measure. You look different, she said. I am different, he said. Give me an hour and then bring me everything. He sat in his office for an hour. The office was large and had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charlotte skyline. He had chosen it for the view. He had always liked views, always liked the sense of elevation, of being above the terrain and able to see it whole. Now he sat at his desk and looked at the skyline and found it less clarifying than he expected. Glass and steel and the gray particular light of a city November, very different from the pewter sky over Harlan County, and something in him registered the difference and held it. On his desk was the framed photograph he kept there, him and Patricia at a fundraising dinner in 2015, both of them smiling the specific smile of people at fundraising dinners. He looked at it for a moment, then turned it face down, not viciously, gently. The way you lay down a weight you've been carrying out of habit rather than need. He opened his laptop. He had 412 unread emails. He started reading. But in the evenings, it was different. Daniel Marsh had spent 20 years working evenings. The evenings had been for calls and documents and preparation for the next day's strategy. His apartment in Charlotte was designed for efficiency, modern, clean, a kitchen that was mostly unused, a living room that functioned primarily as a second office. Now the evenings felt wrong in a way they hadn't before Harlan County. The silence of his apartment was the silence of absence, not presence, hollow rather than full, the silence of a container with nothing in it. He found himself, on the 3rd evening back, sitting at his kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and writing, the way he had written in Walter's kitchen, and the writing felt more real than anything else he was doing. He wrote about Patricia, about the specific way he had failed her, not in the dramatic ways that make good stories, but in the ordinary daily way of simply being somewhere else. He wrote about his father, a diplomat who had been in rooms with presidents and foreign ministers and had always made Daniel feel, without ever saying so explicitly, that rooms with presidents were the rooms worth being in. He wrote about the first acquisition, a small family operation in rural Georgia in 2003, 1,200 acres, an elderly couple who had no heirs and were genuinely ready to sell, a clean transaction by any measure, and the way it had felt, not predatory, not at the time, but like solving a problem, like being competent, like being the kind of person his father would have recognized. He wrote about the Morrison place. He wrote about it in detail, every aspect of the acquisition that he knew, the numbers and the timeline and the circumstances that had made Bill Morrison vulnerable. And when he was done, he sat back and read it and felt the full weight of it, unfiltered, unmanaged, not filed. He called his attorney the next morning. "I want to set up a trust," he said, "agricultural preservation, Tennessee and North Carolina, to start. I want to look at partnering with land trusts in these counties, buying right of first refusal on family farms before they become distressed, helping with financing structures that let families stay on their land." A pause. "I want to think about this carefully. I don't want it to be a publicity exercise. I want it to actually work." His attorney was quiet for a moment. "This is a significant shift in strategy," she said carefully. "Yes," Daniel said. "It is. Does the board?" "I'm the board," Daniel said. "I own 63% of this company." He paused, set up the meeting. "I'll explain it to them." 3 weeks after Daniel left the farm, Walter received a letter, not an email, a letter, handwritten on plain white paper in a compact and careful script. "Walter, I've been back in Charlotte for 3 weeks now. The company's in better shape than I feared. I am in better shape than I feared, though better is relative. I wanted you to know some things. First, I made inquiries about Brennan Farm as a matter of standard procedure 3 years ago. Before I ever sat on that guardrail, before I ever ate your sandwich. The property was flagged as potentially available in the medium term based on county tax records and demographic data. I want you to know this, because I don't want there to be anything between us that I know and you don't. When I told you that I had no intentions toward your land, I meant it. The inquiry was procedural. It never went further. It will not go further. I have removed Brennan Farm from every list and file we have, and I have asked my team to document that removal. Second, I am setting up an agricultural preservation trust. I have a meeting with the Harlan County Land Trust next month. This is not atonement. I don't believe in atonement as a concept. It lets people off too icily. This is correction. There's a difference. Third, I called someone I should have called a long time ago. I won't bore you with the details, but I sat at my kitchen table like you sat at yours, and I picked up the phone. It was hard, and it went better than I deserved. I hope Robert came for his visit. I hope the pot roast was good. I hope the winter wheat is right. Daniel Pease. The cookies were the best thing I've eaten in years. Carol taught you well." Walter read the letter twice. Then he folded it and put it in the kitchen drawer where he kept the things he wanted to keep. Carol's last recipe card. Marcus's most recent postcard. The deed to the farm in its original manila envelope, worn soft along the folds. He sat for a while. Then he got up and went to the barn because there was work to do and the work was waiting. And the land did not pause for reflection, no matter how necessary the reflection was. Robert Brennan came up from Nashville on a Friday in late November, arriving in a silver pickup truck that was newer and cleaner than his father's, and parking it carefully on the gravel drive in the way of a man who has been rehearsing the approach. Walter was on the porch when he pulled in. He had been on the porch for 20 minutes, not because he needed to be out there, but because coming down the steps to meet someone was easier than waiting in the kitchen. Robert was taller than Walter remembered, which was absurd. He was 41 years old. He hadn't grown. But grief and absence do strange things to memory, filling in the gaps with older images, and he had Walter's build. The broad shoulders and the particular way of moving that suggested someone accustomed to physical space, though Robert's hands were softer, and his clothes were the clothes of a man who worked indoors. They looked at each other for a moment on the drive. The November light was thin and flat, the kind that shows everything without flattering anything. "Dad," Robert said. "Robert," Walter said. They shook hands first, the Brennan way, the formal instinct, and then Robert stepped forward and Walter met him, and they embraced. Briefly and firmly, the way men embrace who have not permitted themselves to need it, and now find they do. And Walter felt his son's hand on his back, and felt the 14 months of silence compress into something that was not gone but was no longer in the way. "Come inside," Walter said. "Coffee's on." They sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours before Walter even started the pot roast. Robert talked about Nashville, about his firm, about a development project downtown that was giving him trouble, and a partner he wasn't sure he trusted. He talked the way a man talks who has been storing things up, not desperately, but with the relief of having a place to put it. Walter listened the way he always listened, which was completely, without interrupting, without offering solutions unless solutions were asked for. "You look good, Dad," Robert said at some point in the middle of the afternoon. He said it with a slight question in it, the same question Christine asked in her careful Sunday calls. "Are you managing? Are you really all right? Is the aloneness eating you, or are you eating it?" "I'm all right," Walter said. "Better than I was, honestly." "What changed?" Walter considered. "I had some company," he said, unexpectedly, "for about 10 days. He paused. "It reminded me that the house is a house, not just a container for grief." Robert looked at him. He didn't press for more, and Walter didn't offer more, and that was right. Some things needed more time before they could be given to the people who would ask questions about them. "I want to say something," Robert said then. He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug in the way that Walter recognized as his son gathering himself. "About the East 40. About what I said. Robert, let me say it." He looked at his father. "I went about it completely wrong. I came down here with a business proposal instead of a conversation. I didn't ask you what you needed or what you wanted. I decided what you needed and presented it. And when you pushed back, He stopped. "I said things I shouldn't have said. Things about the farm, about what you were holding on to and why." He shook his head. "I don't actually believe those things. I was scared and I got defensive, and I said things to win an argument that I didn't actually believe." Walter was quiet for a moment. "What did you actually believe?" he said. "That I was going to lose you the same way I felt like I was losing the farm's future," Robert said. "That I was watching you get older and more alone, and I didn't know how to help, and the only tool I had was the financial analysis." He paused. "I'm sorry, Dad, I should have just asked if you were okay." Walter nodded. He looked at his son across the table that his grandfather had built, and his father had refinished, and his mother had set 4,000 meals on, and that he and Carol had eaten at alone for the last years of her life. "I'm okay," he said, "and the farm is okay. And we're going to be okay." He paused. "I'm not selling the East 40. That's still true." "I know," Robert said immediately. "I know. I'm not here about that." "Good." Walter stood up. "Then let me start the pot roast." They spent the weekend together. Friday dinner, Saturday working the farm, Sunday morning slow over coffee and eggs, before Robert drove back to Nashville. On Saturday, Walter showed Robert the winter wheat, which was coming up clean, and even in the rows behind the barn. He showed him the fence work along the north pasture. He showed him Chester and May, the 2 old horses, who accepted Robert's presence with the regal indifference of elderly animals who have seen enough to be surprised by nothing. Robert worked without complaint in his good clothes, getting them dirty without seeming to care. He was not a farmer, had never been and wouldn't be, but he was Walter's son, and Walter's son knew how to work, and the Saturday passed the way good days pass, in motion, in purpose, with the natural conversation that happens between people who are doing something together, rather than sitting across from each other trying to find words. In the afternoon, while they were stacking the last of the split wood along the barn wall, Robert said, Do you ever think about what comes after? With the farm, Walter stacked a piece of wood. He considered the question. A year ago, the same question in a different register would have ended this visit the way the last conversation had ended, badly. Finally, with things said that couldn't be unsaid. But this was a different question and a different day and a different version of both of them. I think about it more than I used to, Walter said honestly. I don't have an answer yet, but I'm thinking about it. He stacked another piece. I'd like the land to stay land. I'd like someone to work it who knows what it is. He paused. That might not be possible forever, but I'd like to find a way to try. Robert nodded. He stacked wood for a moment in silence. Then, there are some agricultural conservation structures I've been reading about. Land trusts, conservation easements. You keep ownership and control, it stays farmland in perpetuity. He said it carefully, without pressure, offering information and not a plan. I'm not pushing anything, just something I read. Walter looked at his son. He saw in the way Robert had offered it, tentative, respectful, waiting, the adjustment Robert had made, the recalibration. He had come back different, not a different person, but a person who had changed the way he approached this particular conversation. That was worth something. That was worth a great deal. I know about those structures, Walter said. Tell me what you read. And they talked, standing by the barn wall in the late November light, stacking wood for another hour. That Sunday morning, before Robert left, Walter showed him the letter. He didn't plan to. He had the letter in his mind all weekend, present but unshared, waiting to see if the moment came. On Sunday morning, with the coffee on the table and Robert's truck keys beside his mug, the moment came. He brought it from the kitchen drawer and set it in front of Robert without explanation. Robert read it. He read it slowly. When he was done, he looked up. "Who is this?" he said. "A man I met on the road," Walter said. "He was hungry. I gave him half my sandwich." Robert looked at the letter again. He looked at his father. "Daniel Marsh," he said. "The agricultural investment, yes, and he was just sitting on the road, on the guardrail, by the bridge over Piney Creek." Walter drank his coffee. He'd been walking for 2 weeks. Had some kind of breakdown, I think, though he wouldn't call it that. Robert was quiet, reading parts of the letter again. His expression was complex, processing multiple things at once, which was something he'd always done, even as a boy. "He told you about the Morrison place," Robert said. "He told me himself, before I had any other way of finding out." Robert set the letter down. He looked at his father with an expression Walter hadn't seen on him in a very long time, the look Robert got when something landed in a way that changed the way he saw something, the look of genuine recalibration, and the land trust he's setting up. "I don't know what it becomes," Walter said, "but I think it's real." He picked up the letter and folded it. People are more than their worst choices, sometimes, if the circumstances are right. Robert nodded slowly. He looked like he might be thinking about more than Daniel Marsh. "Yeah," he said quietly, "sometimes they are." 3 days after Robert's visit, Walter sat down and wrote a letter back. He was not a letter writer by habit. He communicated in person or in brief. Practical phone calls and anything more elaborate felt effortful. But a letter had come, and a letter was the right answer, and so he sat at the kitchen table with a sheet of plain white paper and a ballpoint pen, and wrote in the large, angular script of a man who learned penmanship before computers made it unnecessary. "Daniel, your letter arrived. I read it twice. Thank you for telling me about the inquiry. I would have wanted to know. I don't hold it against you. The inquiry was before, and what matters is the after." Robert came for his visit. We talked for 2 days and worked for one, and it was good, better than good. It was the beginning of something I had given up thinking could begin. I don't know yet what the farm looks like in 10 years or 20, but I know my son is part of figuring it out, and that's more than I had 3 weeks ago. I looked into the Harlan County Land Trust after I got your letter. I have a meeting with them in December. Whatever you're doing from your end, I'd like to understand it before decisions get made. Not because I don't trust you, I do, more than makes easy sense, but because this land is mine to understand and mine to decide about, and I intend to keep it that way. The winter wheat is coming up, right? Chester threw a shoe last week, and May is getting arthritic in the right foreleg, but both are eating well. The cold has settled in for real now. Come back in the spring. The farm is different in the spring. I think you should see it. Walter Brennan. He addressed the envelope to Daniel Marsh's Charlotte address, which he looked up with some effort and wrote in his careful angular script. He drove it to the post office in Harlan himself, rather than leaving it in the mailbox, which was the way Walter handled things he wanted to make sure arrived. Spring came to Harlan County the way it always did, not with a single announcement, but with accumulation, with the slow adding up of warmth and light and color, until one morning you stepped outside and realized the weight of winter was gone. The sycamores along Piney Creek came out first, their new leaves that particular transparent green that only lasted 2 weeks before deepening into summer darkness. The winter wheat reached its full height and began to head out, standing gold and shivering in the April wind. Chester's shoe was fixed, and May's arthritis was managed with medication from the vet in Harlan, and both horses stood in the paddock in the mild mornings, looking out at the pasture with the contented vacancy of creatures whose needs were met. Walter planted the south field in soybeans again, a week later than usual because of a wet April, and walked the rows in the early evenings to check germination with the specific satisfaction of a man whose understanding of a piece of ground runs 20 feet below the surface. Robert came up twice between November and April. The second visit in March, he brought documents from a law firm in Knoxville that specialized in agricultural conservation, not to present a plan, but to share information, to sit at the kitchen table and go through the options together, which was the right way to do it, and which Robert had figured out how to do. Christine drove up from Knoxville with her daughters for Easter weekend. The girls, 12 and 9, city children, mildly bewildered by the farm scale and quietness, were won over comprehensively by Chester and May, and Walter watched his granddaughters stand in the paddock brushing the old horses with the concentrated tenderness of children who have discovered that large animals will accept their love without complication, and felt something he could only have called gratitude if he'd been the type to name such things aloud. Marcus sent a postcard from Kodiak in February with 4 lines on it: "Fishing okay, cold here, thinking about Tennessee," and Walter pinned it to the corkboard in the kitchen next to Christine's Easter photograph and Daniel's letter. Daniel Marsh arrived on the 3rd Saturday in April, driving himself in a car that was not the black SUV, it was a rented sedan. Dark blue, practical, the choice of a man who was paying attention to his choices now. Walter was on the porch. He had been on the porch for 20 minutes. Daniel looked different in the spring. He was not the man who had sat on the guardrail. That man was gone, had been going since the first night in Marcus's room, had continued going through the winter and the return to Charlotte and the meetings with attorneys and land trust officers and board members and all the difficult conversations that a man has when he decides to change the direction of his life from the inside out. He was heavier, not fat but less gaunt, the drawn look of the guardrail man replaced by something more settled. He was dressed practically, work pants, decent boots, a flannel shirt that suggested he'd thought about where he was going. He looked at the farm coming up the drive, the winter wheat in the back, the south field's young soybeans, the sycamores along the creek, and he looked at it the way he had looked at it in November, with the particular attention that Walter had learned to recognize as real rather than professional. "The wheat looks right," Daniel said, getting out of the car. "It does," Walter agreed. They shook hands. Walter's grip was the same grip it had always been. Daniel's was closer now, still not a farmer's hand, but a hand that had been doing things it hadn't done before. Walter noted this without comment. "Coffee?" Walter said. "Always," Daniel said. They spent the morning walking the farm. This was what Walter had meant when he wrote "Come back in the spring." Not a visit, not a tour, but this, walking the land in the season of its promise, when everything that it could be was visible in small form. The wheat heading out, and the soybeans pushing up through the dark soil, and the creek running full with snowmelt and the birds back in. The tree line and the air carrying the particular fragrance of turned earth and new growth that was, to Walter, the most honest smell in the world. Daniel walked beside him and asked questions, real questions, specific questions, the questions of a man who had spent the winter educating himself in a new direction. About the soil composition in the south field, and why Walter had chosen that variety of soybean, and what the yield history was, and how the water table behaved in a dry summer. "You've been reading," Walter said. "I've been trying to learn the difference between knowing about farming and knowing farming," Daniel said. "I'm still on the first part, but I'm trying to understand the second part better." "You can't learn it from reading," Walter said. "I know," Daniel said. "That's why I'm here." At the kitchen table that afternoon, with the April light coming through the windows and the farm visible through the glass, Daniel spread out a set of documents. "The Harlan County Land Trust meeting," Walter said, "and the conversation about the preservation easement. I want you to understand what I'm proposing before it goes any further." Daniel laid out the papers without pressure, in the same way Robert had done in March. Information first, decision entirely elsewhere, entirely with Walter. "This isn't about Brennan Farm specifically, unless you want it to be. The trust is county-wide. But if you chose to put Brennan Farm under a conservation easement, it would mean this land stays agricultural land in perpetuity, regardless of who owns it, regardless of what pressures come later. The development value is extinguished. You keep full ownership and control for your lifetime, and it passes to whoever you choose." Walter looked at the documents. He read the summary page, which was written in plain language, which Daniel had clearly insisted on. "What does it cost?" Walter said. "There's a tax benefit. The donated easement value creates a deduction. The legal work is covered through the trust." Daniel paused. Nothing out of pocket. Walter was quiet for a while. He looked out the window at the wheat. "Robert knows about this?" he said. "I sent him the same documents in March. He said it was your decision and he'd support whatever you decided." Walter nodded. "The Morrison land," he said. "What happens to it?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "We're in conversations with the family. Bill Morrison's son. We're looking at a structure where Marsh Capital exits the property in favor of a conservation trust that gives the family a right of return option." He paused. "It's complicated. It may not be possible to fully write, but I want to try." Walter looked at him. "What changed you?" he said. "Really, the whole of it." Daniel looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked up. "A man on a road gave me half his lunch," he said. "Without knowing who I was, without wanting anything from me, without calculating what I was worth." He paused. "I'd forgotten what that felt like. I'd forgotten there was a kind of transaction between people that wasn't transactional." He was quiet for a moment. "It reminded me that I used to be something other than what I'd become. That the original version of me, before my father's voice in my head, and the first deal and the 43rd deal, that version had values that I'd filed away along with everything else." He looked at Walter. "You didn't ask anything of me. You just included me as a person when you had no reason to." Walter was quiet. "Carol used to say," he said, "that kindness is only real when it costs you something. Otherwise, it's just convenience." "Did it cost you?" Daniel asked. "When you brought me in from the road?" Walter thought about it honestly. "A little," he said. "I was comfortable in my routine. I didn't know who you were or what trouble you might bring." He paused. "But it would have cost me more not to. I would have driven past and known I drove past." He shook his head. "I can't do that. My father couldn't either. It might be the only thing I'm sure I got right in how I raised my children. They can't do it either." Daniel nodded. "Sign the easement documents," he said. "Not because I'm asking you to. Because you've been thinking about it since before I got here, and you know it's right." Walter looked at him. Then he looked back out at the farm. "I know," he said. "I just needed to sit with it until it felt mine." "Has it?" "Yes," Walter said. "It has." He picked up the pen. The signing was witnessed by a notary from Harlan who came out the following Tuesday in a sensible sedan and sat at the kitchen table, and did her work with professional efficiency and left without particular fanfare, which was exactly the right tone for the occasion. The conservation easement on Brennan Farm, all 43 acres, the south field and the winter wheat and the creek bottom and the fence lines and the barn and the farmhouse with its peeling paint and its sagging porch step and its stone chimney that drew perfectly, was recorded with the county on a Wednesday morning in late April. Walter drove home from the county recorder's office and stood in the driveway and looked at the farm for a while. 43 acres. His grandfather's ground. Land that had outlasted the man who broke it and the man who improved it and the woman who made it a home, and would now outlast Walter Brennan himself, would outlast whatever forces of finance and development and changing economics came after him, would remain what it was, a working piece of American agricultural land, in perpetuity. A word that had always seemed abstract to Walter now felt exactly the right size. He went inside. He started dinner. He called Christine to tell her, and she cried a little, which surprised him. And he said, "Don't cry, it's good news," and she said, "I know, that's why I'm crying." He left a message for Marcus. He called Robert, who said, "Good, Dad," and then said it again. "That's really good," with a feeling behind it that Walter recognized and didn't need to name. Daniel stayed for the weekend. On Saturday, he helped Walter with the south field, checking the germination, hand-pulling the early weed pressure in the rows nearest the fence line where the grass came in from the ditch. He was better at it than Walter expected, and Walter told him so. "I've been practicing," Daniel said, which was not quite an explanation. "Where?" "I bought a small piece of land outside of Charlotte," Daniel said. He said it in the tone of a confession, though it wasn't one. 12 acres. I'm farming it." He paused, trying to farm it. "I have help. A neighbor who's been farming his whole life and finds my incompetence educational." Walter stopped walking. He looked at Daniel. "When did this happen?" "January. I needed something real to do in the evenings." He looked at the row he was working. "I'm growing vegetables. I'm very bad at it. The tomatoes have already failed once, and I don't even have tomatoes in the ground yet. I killed the transplants." He paused. "But I keep trying." Walter shook his head slowly. Then he laughed, a real laugh, full, the kind he hadn't produced in some time. It startled both of them slightly, the sound of it in the spring air. "What?" Daniel said. "Nothing," Walter said. "I'm just..." He shook his head again, still smiling. "Carol would have liked you a great deal." Daniel smiled. It was the real smile now, not the ghost of one, wide and unguarded, the smile of a man who has stopped performing and started being. "I think she'd have found me plenty irritating," he said. "She liked complicated people," Walter said. "She found them restful." They worked for another hour in the south field in the April sunshine, two men from different worlds in the same dirt doing the same work. And the work was enough, and the land was enough, and the day was enough, and neither man needed it to be anything more than what it was. On Sunday afternoon, before Daniel drove back to Charlotte, they sat on the porch with coffee. Chester and May were visible in the paddock. The sycamores along the creek were in full leaf. The winter wheat was a solid gold green standing in the back field. "You'll come back," Walter said. It was not a question. "Yes," Daniel said. "If you'll have me, I'll have you." They were quiet for a while. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said. "You generally do. When you sat down on that guardrail next to me, when you decided to bring me in, what exactly made you decide?" Walter drank his coffee. He thought about it. "Your shoes," he said. "My shoes? Completely wrong for the road. Leather soles. Someone had dressed for a different world and ended up in mine." He paused. "A man that lost deserves a sandwich, at minimum." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, "I was sitting there trying to figure out if I wanted to keep going. I don't mean it dramatically, I mean in the large sense, keep trying. Keep existing as something. I wasn't sure. Walter looked at him. And then this man in a beat-up truck comes walking up the road and says, "You hungry?" like it's the most obvious thing in the world, Daniel said, and hands me half his lunch. He shook his head slightly. It was the most human thing anyone had done for me in years, possibly longer. Walter set down his cup. "My father used to say," he said, "that you can tell everything about a man by what he does when there's nothing in it for him." He paused. "I wasn't thinking about that when I walked up to you. I was just thinking you looked hungry and cold, and I had food, and the cold is no one's friend." "That's the thing," Daniel said quietly. "You weren't thinking about it at all. That's the whole thing." The afternoon light was long and amber over the farm, the particular light of late April in the Tennessee hills that seemed to come from inside the landscape rather than above it, filling in from the ground up, making the wheat glow and the leaves glow and the old white paint of the farmhouse glow, everything in its rightful place, everything in its proper light. Walter Brennan sat on the porch his grandfather had built and watched the last of it, and he was not alone, and the house was not an empty container, and the land under the easement was safe for all the years that came after him. And his son was coming back up from Nashville in 3 weeks, and his daughter's girls knew how to brush a horse now, and there was a man from Charlotte with 12 acres and dead tomato transplants who would be back in the summer, and Carol's quilt was on the bed in the spare room, and the winter wheat stood in the back field in the amber light, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.